So yeah, the QAA head office has been in Gloucester since 1997. So, a long time.
But the ENCA office is in Brussels, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the secretariat's based there. We elected people float in and out.
Right. I see. Yeah. So how long does your period last?
I've just been re-elected, so another 3 years. So I will finish up. What are we? This is 2025. October 25. I'll finish.
All
if
right.
not early, we might have to manage the transitions. Carefully. You'll see those lights a bit better.
Okay, maybe we can begin. Good afternoon. Good morning.
Recording in progress.
Everybody, welcome to this month's Zoominar on language, society, and education, hosted by Universitas Negeri Jakarta. I can see we have nearly 40 participants, and I'm sure the and then the speaker usually speaks for about 40 minutes, and we have 15 or 20 minutes for discussion and questions at the end. If you have comments and questions, can you put them in the chat box, please? And then it's easy for me to see who's ready to talk, who's ready to ask a question. Our speaker today is Douglas Blackstock, who is the president of the Association for Quality Assurance in Higher Education, or ENCA. I think can you see me? Can anybody see me?
Yes.
Oh, right, okay. I'll stop here now so that we can see the video of Pak Rektor's welcome.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable Speaker at this Zoominar program, Mr. Douglas Blackstock, President, European Association for Quality Assurance in Higher Education, ENCA. Professor Dedi Purwana, the Director of Postgraduate Program and the Board of Vice Director, lecturers and all students of Postgraduate Program. I'm pleased to welcome you at this monthly Zoominar program with a very interesting topic, Building Trust, European Quality Assurance and International Accreditation. Unlike other topic in the previous webinar, I believe this topic is very special. Usually, the topic relates to linguistic and language studies. Now, it is different. It is about quality assurance and about international accreditation. For this topic, we have a great speaker. He is a president of the European Association for Quality Assurance in Higher Education. Thank you, Mr. Blackstock. Ladies and gentlemen, talking about quality assurance and international accreditation, indeed, it is a serious concern of UNJ. Our vision to reach ahead is to get international recognition step by step, but sure to be a world-class university. To reach the vision, I believe it can be made via international accreditation. Ladies and gentlemen, Regarding this, I am pleased to inform that all 20 study programs in the postgraduate studies has been internationally accredited. Thank you, Professor Dedi, for this achievement. In addition, 6 study programs in the Faculty of Mathematics and Sciences and 1 study program in the Faculty of Sports Science have also been accredited internationally. Other 24 study programs in all faculties are new, ready to be accredited. It is expected by end of this year, more than 30% of all study programs in UNJ have been internationally accredited. Ladies and gentlemen, especially lecturers and students of postgraduate program, I believe from this Zoominar, you will get more than enough information and knowledge about QA, about accreditation, and also about international recognition and collaboration. Please enjoy this webinar. I'm very sure you can take benefit from it. And as required to open this Zoominar, with your permission, I declare this Zoominar officially open. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
As Pat Rector said, the issue of accreditation in higher education is a very, very hot topic in Indonesia at the moment. The Ministry of Education is pushing all universities in Indonesia to work towards accreditation. There are 1,000 universities and about 3,000 higher education institutions of different types. So there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of questions being asked about what exactly higher education accreditation means in the Indonesian context. So over to you, Douglas. Thank you.
Thank you, Hal, and thank you, Rector, for that introduction. I will share my screen and hope that this works. I always worry, despite all these years of COVID, whatever, I worry that my screen sharing skills are inept. Well, good morning. As we mentioned, my name is Douglas Blackstock, and I am the elected president of the European Association for Quality Assurance in Higher Education. And my background was with the Quality Assurance Agency for Higher Education in the United Kingdom. So it's morning here, but I think it's early evening, late afternoon with you. So good day. What I hope to cover is a bit about me and ENCA and what we do and our partnerships globally, an introduction to the European standards and guidelines, which, if you like, are our Bible in Europe in terms of quality assurance. I want to talk about taking our own medicine, how we as agencies improve our alignment with European standards, what are the benefits of international accreditation, what to watch out for, questions you should consider, and branching out a bit about some very short case studies of ENCA members who are offering international accreditation, some already in Indonesia, some interested, some working in the wider region. So I was elected to the board of ENCA in 2019, became president in late 20 to early 21, and was re-elected in October last year in a meeting in Stockholm. My background, as I said, is in quality assurance. Indeed, I was the person that established international accreditation for my own agency, QA. But long before that, we worked in collaboration with BAN-PT. The UK is a very outward sector for higher education. Many thousands of collaborations around the world. Many international students come to the UK, but also many students studying for programs in other countries, UK programs. So BAN-PT are a really important partner for the UK higher education system and for QA in the UK. And ENCA is an association of quality assurance agencies. The equivalent in the ASEAN region is AQUAN. We have 56 members in 31 countries, and only you can only become a full member if you pass the review of your agency. And I'll come back to that later. And 49 affiliates in 30 countries. And we do a number of things. We represent the interests of quality assurance agencies in the political environment in Brussels and across Europe. We provide services to our members and stakeholders, such as seminars and training. We're currently running a leadership program in quality assurance, and also drive the development of external quality assurance. We're leading a project now in terms of what does the future of quality assurance look like in your QA fit for the future. That's what we have to think about, how quality assurance evolves in our system. And we do that through policy input, policy briefings, policy discussions, through events. Currently we have a working group on micro-credentials and how you quality assure them. We have a working group on academic integrity, exploring the global phenomenon of contract cheating and SMLs. And we participate in projects in Europe and also across the world. And for example, we worked in a pan-world program with the Asia-Pacific Quality Network, the Arab Network, on guidance on quality assurance of cross-border higher education. And we have a range of publications. But also one important aspect is we undertake reviews of member agencies. Every 5 years they go through a review, and I'll come back to that, like I said, again in a minute. One of the things I've said, I have a lot of content on my slides, and I do that normally for international audiences because then you have I'm assuming the organisers will circulate, and then you have a takeaway where if you maybe don't understand my Scottish accent, you can read and follow up, and there'll be some web links there as well. ENCA participates, as I mentioned, in global activities. The picture here is in Stockholm in Sweden last October, where we signed a memorandum with the ASEAN Quality Assurance Network. Professor Dato was here from Malaysian Qualifications Agency, but also there were colleagues from the Gulf Quality Network and the African Quality Network. We've been working for many years on the EU SHARE programme, which supported the development of quality assurance in the ASEAN region. We've also been working in EQUAM LA, which is enhancing quality management in Latin America. And last March, I was in Buenos Aires and signed a memorandum with CIAFIS, the representative body of quality agencies in Latin America. And I was also in Accra in Ghana at the end of last year for the final meeting of the harmonisation of African quality assurance and accreditation project, which is now going to start its third round. And part of that is about us sharing our experiences, learning from colleagues in other regions and continents, and also helping build capacity for colleagues to develop their own regional systems. So we have very good relationships with colleagues across the ASEAN network and in other similar networks around the world. One of the things I should say is part of that, there is a developing common understanding and language around the principles of quality assurance. We are not identical. We in Europe, just in Europe, we have 47 different legal systems, cultures, approaches, ways of doing things. And so you cannot get a common thing all the way around the world. But there are similarities and commonalities in what has been developed in ASEAN by the ASEAN Quality Assurance Framework, the African standards and guidelines for quality assurance, and the standards and guidelines for quality assurance in the European higher education area. And all of that is really important in terms of building the credibility of quality in higher education in the context of UNESCO's Global Convention on the Recognition of Quality Assurance. My theme today is about building trust in international accreditation and European standards, but trust is really important in the recognition of qualifications, and key to the UNESCO Global Convention is a credible quality assurance with common practices and common and shared views and trust between agencies, regions, and systems. And that's another topic for a completely other day. But I think in the UNESCO guidelines, credible quality assurance is mentioned 11 or 12 times. So we in Europe, we do all of our work in the context of the European standards and guidelines. And often we go straight to the standards themselves and the guidelines, but there's a scope and context and principles that really, really matter. So the key goal of these ESG is to help develop a common understanding of quality assurance for learning and teaching. That's what we're interested in, learning and teaching. Certainly that's the basis of ESG. Some agencies go beyond that. Some agencies branch out to other areas. But at the core, we focused on the quality assurance of learning and teaching across borders and amongst all stakeholders, that shared understanding. The ESG are not standards for quality, and they don't prescribe how quality assurance processes should be implemented. They provide guidance covering the areas which are vital for successful quality assurance, quality provision, and learning environments. And the reason they don't prescribe is because we have to be flexible to do things differently in national cultural contexts. And at the heart of all quality assurance activities, though, are two purposes: accountability. Governments, students, taxpayers, employers invest huge amounts of money and emotional resource in higher education. So there is a level of accountability, but also about enhancement, about improvement, about making our institutions better, of improving our systems, of raising the standards of it as the world changes and there's new demands on graduates. The European higher education area itself, some people think it's about the European Union. It's much, much bigger than that. There are 47 countries. Currently, Russia and Belarus are suspended, so there was 49. And it's characterized by a diversity of political systems, higher education systems, social, cultural, and educational traditions, languages, aspirations, and expectations. So a single monolithic approach to quality and quality assurance in higher education is inappropriate. What my agency does in the UK and what agencies might do in Spain or in Norway is completely different. But we do it in a way that makes sure we assure the same, we work to the same standards. The standards are very clear. They're set out in the agreed accepted practice for quality assurance in Europe. And they've got to be taken into account and adhered to by all ENCA members and those who want to become ENCA members. But the guidelines explain why the standards are important and how standards might be implemented. They're about setting out good practice or effective practice in the relevant area, but implementation will vary depending on different contexts. It's really, really important. It's not monolithic, it's flexible, it's adaptable, and has to be sensitive to the different cultures of our various nations and sub-nations. So I work in the United Kingdom, as I've mentioned, but we have 4 legal systems: North England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, and 4 higher education systems and 4 higher education approaches and quality approaches, but all within common frameworks of the UK higher education qualifications frameworks and established degree standards. The ESG are based on 4 principles for quality assurance. The primary responsibility for quality sits within autonomous institutions. It is institutions that are responsible for quality. Quality assurance has to respond to the diversity of institutions, programs, students within those systems. Our aim is to support a quality culture, a culture of improvement and advancement for students. But also it has to take into account, quality assurance has to take into account the needs and expectations of the students and all other stakeholders in society. I mentioned earlier, we do what I call taking our own medicine. Every member of my association, those who want to become full members, undergo an external review every 5 years to assess their alignment with the European standards. That review methodology is published. Indeed, similar types of reviews have been rolled out for quality assurance agencies in the ASEAN region and in Africa. The review is coordinated by ENCA, and it's conducted by an international team of experts. The review panel includes some experts from quality assurance agencies from other countries, but also students, nominees from institutions, and sometimes from employers. It's never all people from the same country, and it's not people. So if my agency has just undergone a review by ENCA, there is no one from the UK on the panel. It's entirely an international panel of experts. You might be familiar with this. It involves a self-evaluation, a site visit by an expert team, and a report which is published. And on the basis of that successful review, it allows an agency to apply to renew its membership or become a membership of ENCA, but also to be listed on the European Quality Assurance Register. We have this additional body, ECHA, which we developed as a means of showing the public they can trust the work of agencies like ourselves. And both ENCA and ECHA are voluntary. You don't have to join them, but I would wonder why you wouldn't. I think that would be a really serious question. And they're clear labels of quality with almost every member. I think 2 or 3 of my members are not on ECHA, and I think there's maybe 1 or 2 agencies listed on ECHA who are not full members of ENCA, usually for financial reasons, as small organisations. And the reason I'm explaining this is because all of the agencies I'm going to talk to you about later have gone through this process. Every one of them is trusted and a credible organisation. They may just go about things slightly differently from each other and bring their own strengths and weaknesses. So one of the things that has been developed in Europe, and it was in partnership between ENCA, the European Students' Union, the European Universities Association, EURASI, which is the professional and technical universities, and ECHA, the European Register, is key considerations for cross-border quality assurance in the European higher education area. And in this roadmap for cross-border quality assurance, we set out what the expectations should be for agencies who operate outside of their own region or country. And one of the things we said is a document for institutions to think about, not for agencies. This is meant to help institutions who are considering international accreditation. Is your institution clear on your rationale of why you would want to choose an international agency for quality assurance? I think we've heard earlier that the government in Indonesia wants institutions to do that, but also, are you clear yourself what you expect to get from international accreditation? Which agency is best for your institution? What agency will understand you best? Which agency can work with you best? Which agency have you heard positive reviews and referrals about? I wouldn't ever say to anyone, just look at a single agency. I would see who's available. Indeed, a few years ago, I joined a seminar and presented a seminar organised by the German Exchange Service, DAAD, in Jakarta, to present on quality assurance and international accreditation from my own agency. What does your legal framework prescribe or allow? Which law will cover the contract? Are you contracting with this agency in the host nation's law, or are you contracting under Indonesian law? That's a really, really important thing in terms of, because sometimes these reviews could go wrong. Any service provider could fail or not deliver as you expected. So it's important that you understand where your legal recourse would be if it goes wrong. And what other aspects beyond legal need to be considered beforehand. So, for example, I'll touch on it later as well. Will you need to translate all your documents into the language of the international accreditor? Or will they have to learn to work in your language? Or was most European quality assurances conducted in English? Is English the right language to do this in? And have you communicated with your key stakeholders? I'd say your academic staff, your board of governance, the employers you work with, your students, your government, about why you're undergoing external quality assurance and what you aim to get out of it. For agencies, there's an additional requirement. For agencies listed on the European Quality Assurance Register, ECHA are very clear in their view. Not all of us would always agree with them, but they have got a very clear view, and I think we respect that. And I think it's about the protection. It's about 2 protections, really. They take this view to protect the reputation of European higher education, but also to protect institutions in other countries from agencies or bodies that don't conduct themselves properly. I don't think we have any of that, I'm glad to say, but I think this key commitment from ECHA is really important. So while ECHA is a European register, they recognise that institutions from outside Europe may seek external quality assurance by an ECHA registered agency, and usually looking for a European approach to QA or seeking a European label or label of a particular national country. So ECHA are very clear, and actually think in ECHA we would back them on this with one caveat I'll come back to. They're therefore expected to work in compliance with the ESG when operating outside of the European higher education area. If they're not working in line with the ESG, then they have to be very clear to you, very clear on their website and clear on the register, this is an activity outside the ESG. I will give you an example. For many years, QA in the UK has conducted the quality audits for Hong Kong's University Grants Council. They're done for the Hong Kong system. They're done under a Hong Kong method. It's effectively what we call a white label good. It would be absolutely inappropriate of QA to impose UK standards on the Hong Kong universities when UGC wants a Hong Kong standard. So therefore we have said and agreed with ECHA that sits outside the European standards. We don't claim to be European standards. Indeed, it's not what Hong Kong needs or desires. These are really important things to get out. You need to be clear if you're dealing with a European body, are they conducting the review for you in the context of the European standards or some other standard? So why do institutions seek accreditation? So it was a project led by ECHA actually, looking into why various aspects of international quality assurance happens. But as well as this, I've used that as my main source. It's the RECAP project, but also my own experience of, I mentioned earlier, I launched QA's International Accreditation Project. That happened because Macau Polytechnic University, the SAR Macau, came to us and said, we'd like to undergo a UK review. And so we developed an international quality review label. I know from colleagues in France, that's why they started international accreditation, because certain institutions wanted to learn from the French system. So why do institutions seek accreditation? Well, sometimes the governments wish them to. But for many, it's the possibility to work with an agency that suits their mission and profile and can in turn best meet the needs of the institution. It strengthens internationalization policies and can develop collaboration with foreign institutions and recruit international students. Macau Polytechnic University, after they were able to carry the QA accreditation logo, massively increased the recruitment of international students. It helps improve the recognition of their qualifications and perception of their qualifications outside of their own country and even sometimes within their own country. And it increases stakeholder engagement, strengthening the institution's own responsibility for quality and the external acknowledgement of the institution's efforts. If you like, it's a recognition internationally that your institution is meeting really high standards and improving its quality. Why do ENCA members offer international accreditation? Well, sometimes because we've been invited, but also other reasons. It's a possibility to expand national and international profile and gain prestige. Many of us take the view that we are influencers in the world, that we are partners in the world, that we are global in our outlook, and therefore these international activities boost that, not just our reputation, but our ability to learn. For some, it's about increasing income, and I think no one is allowed to trade for free in this process. I don't, my agency is funded by the institutions and the government, and they would say, that's fine, we're really pleased you're doing this activity, but you have to charge for it because you can't use our money. And I think that's fair. But also opens up additional projects and partnerships, such as training and sharing of experts. I mentioned earlier our work with BAN PT. Well, we have worked on training and support on many occasions. It's a learning opportunity to improve your own processes and methodologies, to take practice back to your own country and share with institutions that you may have seen some really innovative activities. I mean, one of the things we all think about in higher education is, I think, the first year experience. How do we keep students in our institutions? in those first few months that they come to us. And it's the ability to promote continuous improvement within their specific field, particularly if they're working in specialist areas. What should you consider if you're thinking about engaging an international agency? Are you buying a badge? Do you simply want the badge, or do you want a process that's going to help you learn and improve your institution? Are there any wraparound services? So is there a networking opportunity? Is there training opportunities? Is there conferences or workshops? Do they, beyond the price of the buying of the accreditation process, do they offer additional value to you and your institution? Do you get a chance to meet other accredited institutions and share practice? Are there genuine opportunities for partnership possible with institutions from the country and the agency that you've been working with? Can you afford the price? Cheap isn't always good. Sometimes quality costs. And so can you afford the price of an agency that will give you what you need? And there are, I mentioned there, other additional costs such as translation of your documents. That might just be time. But what matters to you, price or the quality and reputation from the agency you're working with? Does the agency have an international team, or are they just bringing their own people from their own system who may just impose their views on you? Are they conferring any status on you? I mean, I don't think anyone has the power to say you are a UK or a French or a German or a Spanish institution. What they're saying is you passed a review like them. But what are they actually conferring on you in terms of status? Are they culturally sensitive? Do they understand your culture? And indeed, I would say that is incumbent on any agency working in Indonesia that they partner and have good connections and cooperation with BAN-PT. And are they members of ENCA and or listed in ECA? If on ECA, is this listed on the ECA website as an ESG compliant activity or not? That's a really important in terms of you making your decisions, and ultimately it will be for you to decide which agency you would go with. So I'm going to move on to some case studies. There's a lot of content here, and I will only be able to give them a short period of time each. I'm presenting them in alphabetical order because that's just the easiest way, so that I give everyone a fair hearing. The majority of agencies I'm presenting on are from Germany, and that's because, so there's actually three countries I'm going to cover: Germany, France, and the UK. And the difference between Germany and France and the UK is France and the UK have a single national agency, whereas Germany has a competitive market for quality assurance with agencies that produce reports for the German Accreditation Council as a body that sits deciding on the status of institutions in countries. So they have a range of activities between programme and accreditation and institutional evaluation. AXPGS is not very active yet in Indonesia, but it started some work. They currently are active in more than 150 higher education institutions with 1,500 study programs. They're working in Austria, Hungary, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Lebanon, Lithuania, Netherlands, Oman, Romania, Slovakia, Switzerland, Thailand, and Turkey. So a broad range of international expertise. They're very clear that their process has to be fit for purpose for the country they're working in and adapt and reflect the culture, and have panels that understand that. They have got various opportunities that they offer in terms of accreditation and external evaluation for programs or evaluation and even consultancy upon request for higher education institutions as a whole. And they've got very clear criteria. They're based on the ESE in close accordance with the German criteria, but if applicable, the national criteria are considered. And what you'll see is in each slide, I've given you the website address of the agency and also the generic email contact to be able to contact them. ACWAS, which I think visited the university recently, is another German agency. I can't speak German, so I can't pronounce the name in English there on the logo. But between May 20 and June 23, they've carried out 53 accreditation procedures in Indonesia. They've got 360 experts from Europe and Asia but around the world as well, who've contributed to the panels. They've got feedbacks from universities and panel members that there is satisfaction and that in the procedure that was conducted by an independent German institute. They've identified areas for improvement in universities in Indonesia: staff development, applied orientated research, definition of learning outcomes, and internationalization. It's been difficult to say, but to align the logic of the national accreditation system and the international approach. That causes some problems with the recognition of results, but they believe you can work through it. The conclusion is the accreditation process is a driver for change in the Indonesian universities they've worked with. ASEAN is possibly one of the most active and longest active in Indonesia, with 107 accreditation procedures in Indonesia since 2016. And you can see from that map the range of institutions they've worked in. And they, in common with AQUAS and others, deploy Indonesian experts on their reviews. They're very clear. They produce a country brief before any international visit. They produce a country brief for the team so that they can understand them. They have training for experts and workshops for institutions that have been reviewed. And they're increasingly focusing on institutions developing an approach to learning outcomes, but also critical thinking skills. And that critical thinking actually is a global discussion now. We moved in Europe to student-centered learning 10 years ago, but I think critical thinking is increasingly emerging as an issue. FIPA is another German agency that's very active has been active recently in Indonesia. They've had good 25 proceedings of program accreditation, over 107 programs in the moment, with a couple of institutional accreditation processes coming up. They've got 37 procedures in 23-24, 2 of them at an institutional level. They've got a workshop in April on site with around 300 participants. They've got online workshops, especially for universities, and they've had visits in Bonn from Indonesian delegations, and they've had a meeting with BAN PT in April of this year. An agency that hasn't yet worked in Indonesia, but is very active in the region, particularly in Vietnam, is HASCHERET, the High Council for Evaluation and Research in France. They use the same standards and frameworks in France, but adapted to an international context. In Vietnam, they've recruited Vietnamese local experts, but within the panel, mostly French, but some Vietnamese colleagues as well. And sometimes they have joint evaluation procedures with the host agency. They've done this in Armenia and Romania, a joint review with the local team. So I did some work on a project, for example, with the French university in Armenia. They've got very close cooperation with the partners in Vietnam to better understand the local context prior to an evaluation. So you've heard that 3 or 4 times now, understanding the context before you have evaluation. On demand for them, the demand they have is generally from HEIs who've got a model that's quite close to French universities, but also who want to enhance recognition, and they believe the institutions tell them they are more easily accepted as a partner with foreign institutions, particularly if you want to partner with a French institution. And they're very much enhancement-led evaluations. They're about improvement rather than necessarily just compliance, especially when an institution, when a university has been reviewed several times before, and it knows the methodology and evaluation framework. This is a new approach using the French system. But they're very clear as well, they pay very high attention to the integrity and ethics of the HEIs we evaluate. Colleagues, you may not be aware because of you work in an institution, but those of us who work at national level are aware around the world there are fake universities, there are accreditation mills, there are bogus organizations. So they're very clear in understanding the ethics of the institution they want to work with. And that's why I encourage all colleagues to always speak to the local agency to make sure you're dealing with bona fide institutions. And the last one I want to talk about is my own organization. I should have said I was the chief executive of QA for 6 years. I spent 20 years full-time. I'm now retired from full-time work, but still work 1 day a week for QA as an international consultant. And you know, been with them a long time. QA is the UK's independent body. It's not for profit organisation. Its owners, its members are the universities themselves. So it's grown out of the university system, but also has delivered reports and institutional audits for the government bodies so that they can trust the system that they fund. It offers international accreditation using local and international experts. So teams are broadly drawn from multiple countries. They have an accreditation panel, which PASCASARJANA from BAN-PT sits on. They carry a QA Global mark. That's the brand they use, QA Global. They also offer bespoke consultancy services. I've been working with the British Council. So, for example, in the Philippines, they've worked on a really important project to implement transnational education. They have over 20 memorandums of understanding with partner agencies around the world, including BAN-PT, and host an international partners forum for quality agencies from around the world to exchange views and ideas. It is a membership body, so institutions are the members of the QA, and they've now opened up to international members. So particularly, you can be an international associate member and an international full member. And it's currently particularly working on its institutional evaluations, but has moved now into programme evaluations, with very strong input in a World Bank funded project in Africa, reviewing the African Centres of Excellence. One of the things we did just after I retired, the work happened before I retired, is we produced a country report in Indonesia. So one of the things the QA really does is to support the UK sector, investigates the higher education system in a particular country, and produces a report and shares that. So there's an international insight into Indonesia, and that was developed in collaboration with BAN-PT. Colleagues, that is everything I wanted to say about the individual agencies. I've spoken to all of these colleagues about this. All of them have said is that the local context really matters. The Indonesian context matters. Their processes are flexible and adapted to make sure they fit the cultural context of Indonesia. That they operate in line with European standards, as we would expect, and they look to partner with their institutions and provide wider opportunities for development and learning and sharing practice, and that they are committed to the long-term being a partner of Indonesian universities. I've put on this last slide a series of useful documents and websites. I would encourage anyone who's thinking about moving into an international accreditation process to at least understand, are these members of INCA? Are they listed on ECAR? Do you understand the background to cross-border quality assurance and engaging international agencies from these various reports, to do your research, to consider more than one agency? You know, I think it's very easy to just go where everybody's going, but I think about your own institution, its needs, its values, the students, the professors, the academic staff, the community as a whole, and your stakeholders, and where you can best build trust. My conclusions is that international accreditation is a really valuable experience. I have had long conversations with some colleagues. Indeed, I was in Africa last year when I mentioned I spoke at the 60th anniversary of the National Universities Commission. Then I went on to a conference of 53 agencies from across Africa. And we were very clear about avoiding neo-colonialism and not imposing European values on Africa, because Africa is developing itself. And it's the same in our work with colleagues in the ASEAN region, the 10 agencies across the ASEAN countries. Colleagues are developing their own systems. You have your own system in Indonesia. What we are doing by offering international accreditation is an addition, it's a boost, it's an enhancement. It's not to transpose and impose our views and our values on you. However, as I reiterate what I said earlier, there is a developing global language and quality assurance that is broadly similar but not identical, because the young people of today are much more mobile. They're much more likely to work in international companies. They're much more likely to need their qualifications recognised somewhere else, particularly if they want to move abroad for master's study or doctoral studies. So actually this trust, this language of quality assurance is very common, very useful and very helpful for us all in developing our systems. So at that, colleagues, I would like to thank you for having had the opportunity to speak to you this morning. I hope you understood my accent. I hope that I've given you something useful and some tips, and I'm really, really pleased to have the chance. And I'll stop the slides here now so that we can see each other again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Douglas. That's a massive amount of information, touching on lots of very interesting issues. If I can't see any comments or questions in the chat box yet, so while we're waiting, I'll ask you a couple of questions myself, if that's okay. I'm very impressed by your emphasis on trying to avoid uniformity, standardization, and recognizing local contexts. A couple of points you mentioned used the term harmonization and also alignment. Excuse me, can you explain how this would work if, for example, an agency in Europe is working with an agency in Africa, and inevitably there will be differences in the local context? How would harmonization work in that context? Is it a matter of the Africans coming into line with the Europeans, or what?
No, I mean, I think colleagues are very clear at developing what Africa needs. But what I would say is that having been in this business for a very long time, in fact, my first venture in quality assurance was in 1987 as student president. I was involved in an external visit from the Council for National Academic Awards. So I've been around the quality assurance for a long time. The principles are broadly the same everywhere. The practice is what differs. So what colleagues in Africa have been doing, and it has been a European Union funded project with the African Union. It's got very important roles for the Association of African Universities. It's trying to develop a common platform across Africa. But what's looked at Europe, has looked at ASEAN, has looked at other practices and to say, what is it here that we can learn from that fit for themselves? I would say that if you were to sit down and develop standards for approaches to quality assurance that involved academic experts and peer reviewers, you're not going to come up with too many things that are that different. So when I talk about harmonization, it's about the harmonization to a point where you can agree common principles. It is not homogeneity, it is not duplication, it's not replication of the European context into Africa. I mean, so the next phase of this project, in the last phase, INCA coordinated the external visits to African agencies. We said this time, no, we have to build that capacity in Africa. Africa has to do this for itself. Africa wants to do it for itself, and they're looking to establish a Pan-African quality assurance agency. Now, the problem with that is Africa is a huge continent. Africa has got a massive change going on, and there are really important, very influential and important regional networks, French-speaking, Portuguese-speaking, English-speaking, and actually that diversity it's actually wonderful to see the richness of that. And it's the same, therefore, in the work we've done with colleagues in Southeast Asia. The systems are not identical, and why should they be? Why would you want them to be identical? But what if you can operate at a level of principles, you can examine in a different manner. And the one thing is you know, we are very clear on this. What I would say, Howell, is that no national government is going to give up its right to see how its higher education system should be run, because it's run in the interest of their voters, their stakeholders, their businesses, their companies. But if you want your young people and anyone who becomes a student to thrive and develop in a globalized economy, you need to get recognition of qualifications. So therefore, you have to have the principles of quality assurance that allow that building of trust that if I'm in Malaysia, I can tell that an Indonesian qualification has been quality assured and I can trust it.
Okay, thank you. And there's a question from Ibu Desi Safitri. Thank you for the very insightful presentation. I actually have a question that I want to raise. Is there any relationship between international accreditation and quality of higher education?
Well, I think yes, I think there is, and I think what it is it's so I mentioned earlier about it was very difficult at first when we started doing this. We take external reviews of our own agencies in a very similar process that institutions undergo. Let's start with, you've got a set of standards, you're going to be assessed against that, and you start with writing a self-evaluation. That's the first improvement right away. As you start to examine yourself, or as I think it's in, it might be in Total Quality Management or EFQM, or one of these quality models, the self-evaluation is about looking at yourself in the mirror. So what do you see? Most mornings I think I need a shave, but you look at your institution and say, what are we doing well? Where can we get better? What are we going to do before we get this visit? And then what are we going to test out with a panel about, we have these ideas about improvement, can you give us your expertise, your views and your feedback? But also a panel might say, actually, this practice isn't securing your quality. I know a university recently, we have a system here in the UK called external examination. And this institution had an external accreditation visit, and it turned out that they hadn't been implementing their processes. So in certain parts. So actually, that you look at yourself in the mirror with self-evaluation, a panel coming in shines a light on practice and implementation, and also brings practice and implementation. So it can help you assure yourself of your own quality and also help you improve. And the difference is, I think, with international accreditation, it comes in with a slightly different perspective than your own national system and brings in a much broader range of expertise. So I think it'd be really, really important. This is another thing I would say. You need to know about the quality of the people who are coming on the panels. Are they from highly respected academics, from prestigious institutions, and institutions that might be in some ways similar to you, with a research background or a teaching background or a professional and vocational background? You need people who have got the right background for you to help your institution improve. So I think there is a direct relationship between accreditation, international accreditation, and quality. I think we've lost you, Howell, have we?
Okay, right. There's another question. Thank you for the opportunity. What is the importance of international accreditation for institutions? I think you touched on this in one slide, but rather quickly.
Yeah, sure. Look, there are, well, in the Indonesian context, it's important because I think government is pushing for it and is funding. So that is one. I think my understanding of that is somewhat limited because I haven't spoken directly. I was supposed to meet your minister, but COVID hit. I was meant to attend the session in London, but COVID prevented the travel. My local MP, actually the MP for QA, used to work in Indonesia, and Richard Graham is very active in promoting Indonesia and trade between the UK and Indonesia. So we've had lots of conversations and connections. If I take it in the context of what a country I know very well, that has had a whole range of its institutions reviewed and an international accreditation by QA, that is a country with a modern system, and it sees bringing in the international view and the international accreditation process as raising the perceptions of its institutions in the outside world. So I think those of you who are academic colleagues, I think will probably be like most academic colleagues and not really see the rankings as the most important thing. But actually every institution wants to go up the rankings, and every government wants their country to go up the rankings. So colleagues see the perception part of their institutions in their countries as rather important. So there's a national government perspective. It's about raising our national profile. It's about getting broader recognition, but it's also about pushing our institutions to go to a different level again. So that's the national government one. For institutions, I think brand association is one. Have we undergone a review by a German or a French or a UK body? It shows that we met international standards. That makes us stand out. Can we learn from a different perspective? Can we learn from an international expertise? Can we improve our institution by an outside view that doesn't look at it purely in our own context, but thinks much more broadly? So those, I think, would be the key things that I would like. I'd be really interested, though, if there is if there is a document available in English to look at in terms of what the government, what's the background to the Indonesian government's policy on this, because I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. Okay, there's another question. What's your suggestion relating to critical points that a higher education system must have in order to get unconditional international accreditation?
I think, look, if I was, let's say I was the, if I was ever lucky enough to be a vice chancellor, I think my days of that are gone. But I think in my institution has got to get the accreditation. First critical point: what do we want from this? Who's the type of organisation that best fits us? Some of the things I said earlier. So there's a first critical point. Number two, what are these standards we're going to be assessed against? And before we produce a self-evaluation for anybody else, what's our own readiness? And as part of that, how willing are our academic community to undergo this process? So there is a pre-journey, if you like. How do we engage with the academic community within the institution, including the students, about what are our aspirations for international accreditation? What is the type of accreditation that fit us? What are our strengths and our weaknesses in relation to this? And how might we best put ourselves forward in terms of what we think we are really good at? And where can we need to improve before we go in the process? So there's an aspect of quality assurance that sometimes the critics, and let's be honest, there's plenty of critics of quality assurance. There are two things that I think come with it. One is a quality assurance visit is preventative medicine. You put things right before the doctor comes to visit. You know, you put things right so that you are well prepared to pass a review. And two is, we've got to make some improvements here or we'll fail. So I would think about the really critical point I'd sum up is my organisation ready to go into this process? Can we go into this and do the very best we can? And then from there, how do you then pitch the institution? How do we sell ourselves, if you like, not just as a cosmetic exercise, but how do we transmit what we're doing that's really, really good, that should be respected in this process?
Okay, thank you. We're running out of time. Pat Faisal, would you like to say something or ask a question? Pat Faisal is in charge of accreditation at Universitas Negeri Jakarta. Is very, very experienced. Are you there, Pat Faisal?
I'm trying to read Faisal's slide behind this. An international webinar. Assessment on teaching and learning process in higher education and lessons learned from Germany, South Korea and Indonesia. Send me your presentation, Faisal, please.
Any comments about Faisal? No. Maybe not. Anybody else? Can I ask, just out of interest, is Oxford University subject to QAA accreditation?
Every university in the UK, the process in England is changing. It's now going to be undertaken by the Office for Students. There is no exemptions in the UK. Oxford, Cambridge. If you go on the QA website, you'll find reports of Oxford and Cambridge. So one of the things, Bill, that the sector in the UK did in the early 90s to fend off government interference, they created their own organisation, the Higher Education Quality Council, which then merged into QA, because the universities felt that they would protect their autonomy best by creating an organisation that would conduct peer review of institutions, and all signed up to that. Really, really important to them that it is they talk about earned autonomy, and so you demonstrate that quality by subjecting yourself to external visits. Unfortunately, England's moved much more into a regulatory space, where government is telling institutions what to do more. Perhaps if they had put some things right that QA had mentioned, like the degree classification system, they wouldn't have found that had happened. But yeah, and I don't know if did you teach at Leeds? It's Leeds University. Should we?
I teach at Leeds. My first degree was from Oxford.
I'll send you a link in there. I can't. But the system in England is very different now. It's very much risk-based because, well, one of the things is one of my colleagues wrote in 2009. There's diminishing marginal returns from repeated cycles of doing the same thing, and institutions in the UK have gone through 4 or 5 audits. So that's why Scotland now, for example, and Wales have moved. England has moved to a risk-based but compliance framework. Scotland and Wales have moved to quality enhancement framework.
Oh, right. That's interesting. Okay. It's 5 o'clock. I can't see any more questions. So thank you very much, Douglas. It's very informative. And it could be very useful, I think, if we can see your PowerPoint so that we can circulate them and read them.
I'll ping that over to you now.
Yeah, thanks.
Brilliant.
This is the last session for this semester. So September, there won't be a meeting. No, August, there won't be a meeting. And then we'll start again in September on the 14th of September. And I plan that there should be 4 sessions in the next semester: September, October, November, December. So when that's finalized, I'll circulate the program to everybody. Thank you to UNJ, as usual, for hosting the meeting. And thank you again to Douglas for his very interesting presentation. See you again next time, September.